is going on, everybody? Thanks for checking out another episode of the Liberty Cast. This week, we're going to talk about the left's renewed gun control efforts, Sidney Powell's explosive accusations. Does she really have the goods? And we'll examine the Georgia Senate runoff and look at each of the candidates, focusing, of course, on the leftists in the race. Candace Owens got herself in trouble again, but she wasn't wrong, and I'm pretty sure she doesn't really care. We'll get into all of that and more straight ahead. Hey, thanks for tuning in. If you're listening to the audio version, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts from. And if you prefer to watch, go to rumble.com/thelibertycast and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Okay, folks, let's hit it. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. What is it about those 27 words that is so difficult to understand? Especially the final clause, shall not be infringed. It seems pretty cut and dry to me. But that doesn't stop leftists, anti-constitution gun grabbers from continuously proposing laws that do exactly that. And I meant to talk about this last week, but there was so much to get to that I didn't get a chance to get to this. But gun grabbers here in Texas, backed by Bloomberg and his anti-liberty groups, Every Town for Gun Safety and Moms Demand Box Wine, wasted no time in pre-filing a number of bills ahead of Texas's next legislative session. There were 36 gun-related bills filed, 8 of which were filed by Republicans, and those 8 actually are intended to expand gun rights, which is a good thing. For example, HB 299 expands the list of permitless carry exceptions to include anyone eligible for a license to carry, as long as the person is not a gang member, obviously, and the weapon is holstered or otherwise concealed. Another one expands the protections for carrying handguns beyond active judges to include government attorneys and retired judges. And there are others that would prohibit red flag laws and allow school marshals to carry a concealed handgun rather than requiring it to be locked up on the school grounds, which is so ridiculous. It defeats the purpose. But there were 28 others proposed that are definite infringements, and I'm not going to go over every one of them, but I'm going to highlight a few that should get your attention. And I'll post a link to all of these in the show notes. All of the bills focus on 5 gun-grabbing objectives: enacting extreme risk protection orders, expanding background checks, banning the sale of high-capacity magazines, standard capacity magazines, limiting the open carry of semi-automatic long guns, and require stolen guns to be reported to law enforcement, which is already the law, but redundancy, I guess. Who knows? One of them is HB 172, which bans so-called assault weapons. I know, typical left-wing anti-constitution wish list infringement, but what caught my eye was one of the characteristics they claim of an assault weapon. They claim that a semi-automatic centerfire rifle that has the capacity to accept a detachable magazine, that has a pistol grip that protrudes from beneath the action of the firearm, a folding or telescoping stock, or a thumbhole stock. So my buddy's Mini 14 with the laminated thumbhole stock, which otherwise would not qualify as under their definition of an assault weapon, now based on this abomination of a bill, would render him a felon. If he didn't lose it in a boating accident, that is. Another piece of proposed legislation would ban campus carry, which is a reversal of the law that Governor Abbott signed in 2015, allowing campus carry. HB 208 will ban us from building our own ARs or pistols for that matter. And I know someone who was building his own 1911s. They were nice. So that would now be illegal as well. And finally, there is HB 196 that limits your use of deadly force against an aggressor, in that you will not be considered justified in shooting if you can retreat. Now, shockingly, this does not apply in your home or your property, but there is a provision in there that mentions provoking the intruder. So if you got into an argument with someone and they come to your house to continue said argument, you would have to retreat as a result of this law, this bill, which could become law, which is such These people hate you. There is no other explanation for this madness. They make it easier for criminals to walk free by eliminating cash bail, but make it harder for you to defend yourself against these criminals that they're letting out on the street. What other explanation can there be? They hate you. They want to control you, and they're using the criminal element to achieve that objective. And there are a lot of other bills. Some of them are redundancies, like I said, an attempt to make something already illegal illegaler. I don't know. But what I do know is that none of it makes any sense to anyone with a couple of brain cells to rub together. And by way of proof that gun control doesn't work, New Jersey has now had the worst year since 2010 for violent crime. Last week, Paterson, New Jersey had its 104th shooting. Now, from 2010 to 2019, Paterson averaged 88 shootings a year, with an average of 103 victims, including 15 fatalities. This is according to their statistics. This year's shooting incidents mark a 22% increase over the past decade, and that's still some time left in the year. And the number of victims is up to 145. But how is this possible? New Jersey has some of the most draconian gun laws, which are supposed to prevent this sort of thing. Why isn't it working? It couldn't possibly be that the criminal element doesn't give a rat's ass about gun laws, could it? No. Couldn't be it. Meanwhile, residents of places like Paterson and Trenton or Newark have to appeal to their chief of police for permission to exercise their constitutional rights. And sometimes submit character references. What is that? Yet criminals commit crimes, get released because the courts are being shut down due to the China virus. Remember back in when all of this madness started? New Jersey was one of the states that released thousands of prisoners due to concerns that they might catch the virus. So again, criminals out on the street, leaving law-abiding citizens with no way to protect themselves against the criminals. It's insane. And finally, as a bit of good news, Kyle Rittenhouse has been released from jail and is home on a $2 million bond. His attorney and his mother have been appealing to the public for donations to raise money to get him released on bond. And apparently, Mike Lindell, the inventor of MyPillow, and Ricky Schroeder, the actor from Silver Spoons back in the day, I'm dating myself, and NYPD Blue, made donations that put that fund over the top that allowed them to bring him home. Now, I don't know what Ricky Schroeder's politics are, but I'm guessing based on this that he's at least somewhat conservative. Not that it really matters. He helped get Kyle home. That's pretty much all I care about. He keeps to himself for the most part, and that's all right by me. The important thing is that Kyle is out of jail while he awaits trial, and hopefully it never even gets to that point. Considering all the evidence that we have seen so far, how it got to this point is beyond me. But anyway, let's move on because there's still a ton that I want to cover. Did you guys happen to catch that press conference with Sidney Powell, Rudy Giuliani, and Jenna Ellis? First of all, can we dispense with this silly notion that there is no evidence of voter fraud or election fraud? Now, I don't know if you've noticed this, but they used to say that there was no evidence of voter fraud, and it was a right-wing fever dream to suggest it. Now they've shifted a little bit, and the less dishonest leftists are saying that there's no evidence of widespread voter fraud. But the talking heads on Communist News Network and MSDNC and even Fox now are saying that the allegations of voter fraud are baseless.
Well, that was certainly a colorful news conference from Rudy Giuliani, but it was light on facts. So much of what he said was simply not true. And, Giuliani, he opened by making this really bold and baseless claim.
We want every legal vote to be counted, and we want every illegal vote to be...
I just think we have to be very clear. She's charging, the other side is welcoming fraud and welcoming illegal voting. Unless she has more details to back that up, I can't in good countenance continue showing you this.
Baseless claims that are inflammatory, designed to undermine your faith in American democracy. But election officials across the country insist, as of today, there is no evidence of any widespread fraud affecting the outcome of the presidential election, that our precious democracy was not tampered with, and that such baseless and false claims are an insult to the thousands of election officials and workers across the country who we have seen dedicating themselves 24/7 to ensure a fair and free election for all of us.
We have to stop with this nonsense that there's no evidence of voter fraud or that the allegations are baseless. They claim to have hundreds, if not thousands, of affidavits between Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Georgia. And even Arizona. Affidavits are, in fact, evidence. Statements of witnesses signed under penalty of perjury is evidence, direct evidence. And it's testimony of the witnesses' direct knowledge. So Giuliani outlined a number of cases of voter fraud, fraudulent ballots, multiple votes, ballot manipulation, all of that. And I'm not confident that those cases are going to be successful. A lot of them have failed so far, and judges don't seem to be particularly impressed with the cases that have been brought so far. But Sidney Powell is on something different. She is claiming to have a ton of evidence of the voting machines switching votes. Now, we talked last week about how Dominion Voting Systems was created for the purposes of stealing elections. And she got into a bit of a dust up with Tucker Carlson because she wouldn't give him any evidence, any details of the evidence that she said she has. I don't blame Tucker for asking. I don't blame her for not giving it to him. Because if what she has is that explosive, releasing it to the public before she takes it to court, that could be a mistake. And frankly, her only obligation is to win in court. She doesn't have to give us anything. She doesn't owe us anything. Would I like to see what she has? Absolutely. Absolutely. But she also alleged that Tucker was, well, let's let her say it in her own words.
Tucker Carlson said that he had invited you on his show to share evidence of the software flipping votes, and he said you got angry and refused to provide evidence for your claims of voting software flipping votes. How do you respond to Tucker Carlson? Did you get angry with the show because they texted you and asked you to please provide evidence of what you're alleging?
No, I didn't get angry with the request to provide evidence. In fact, I sent an affidavit to Tucker that I had not even attached to a pleading yet to help him understand the situation. And I offered him another witness who could explain the mathematics and statistical evidence far better than I can. I'm not really a numbers person. But he was very insulting, demanding, and rude, and I told him not to contact me again in those terms.
Now, I don't want to spend a ton more time on this. I'll just say that I get it. Tucker's a journalist. I'm sure he can be overbearing at times when he's trying to get a story. I'm sure that if the exchange was done over text, some context and nuance in the conversation probably got lost in the translation. It happens. If she has the evidence, it will come out and she will be vindicated. If she doesn't, her reputation that has been on a meteoric rise of late will come crashing back down to earth. It's as simple as that. But listen to Sidney Powell actually describe what she has uncovered regarding the Dominion voting system. And this is a bit long. She spoke for about 15 minutes in that press conference, and I pulled about 2 minutes of it. So I encourage you to check out the entire thing, or at least her portion of it. But check this out.
It is a stunning detailed affidavit because he was with Hugo Chavez while he was being briefed on how it worked. He was with Hugo Chavez when he saw it operate to make sure the election came out his way. That was the express purpose for creating this software. He has seen it operate, and as soon as he saw the multiple states shut down the voting on the night of the election, he knew the same thing was happening here, that was what had gone on. That's when they came in the back door with all the mail-in ballots, many of which they had actually fabricated. Some were on pristine paper with identically matching perfect circle dots for Mr. Biden. Others were shoved in batches. They're always put in a certain number of batches, and people would rerun the same batch. This corresponds to our statistical evidence that shows incredible spikes in the vote counts at particular times, and that corresponds to eyewitness testimony of numerous people who have come forward and said they saw the ballots come in the back door at that time. Smartmatic has been associated with the Venezuelan government led by Hugo Chavez, which is openly hostile to the United States, and of course, as we all know, communistic and really brutalizing its own people. The system has been continued there by Mr. Maduro and ensured his election. This letter was written to Hank Paulson on October 6, 2006 by Congresswoman Carolyn B. Maloney. Senators Klobuchar and Warren have raised these concerns as recently as December 2019. Why our government has not taken them seriously is beyond my comprehension.
There is a lot to unpack there. We have ties to Venezuelan dictators. She also mentioned George Soros, foreign countries, national security concerns. It is a leftist wet dream for fundamentally transforming America, which is what they claim they want to do. But here's something to keep in mind. Now, don't get me wrong, I am hopeful and cautiously optimistic that Sidney Powell actually has the goods and Trump will emerge victorious. I think that the left has done a lot of damage, and regardless of how this turns out, unity is something that is going to take a long time to recreate. And I was going to use Biden's Build Back Better, but saying it out loud just sounds stupid and juvenile. And we're going to talk about that unity nonsense a little later in the show. But I just hope that the evidence that she has is so overwhelming that the courts don't have a choice but to side with Trump on this. Regardless of what happens with the presidency, there is still the issue of the Georgia Senate races. Kelly Loeffler is running against Raphael Warnock, and David Perdue is running against John Ossoff. Why are these races so important? Well, right now, Republicans have a 50 to 48 majority. If they lose these races, it will be a 50-50 tie with left of Bernie Kamala Harris as the tiebreaker. And this is assuming that rhinos like Mittens and Collins don't vote with the Democrats. If they win one of these races, they have a majority, a tenuous one, a very slim one. But if they win both, they can breathe a little easier, but still can only afford to lose one of those votes. So let's look at these races. First, we have Kelly Loeffler and Raphael Warnock. This guy, Warnock, is a piece of work. An alleged reverend, maybe I shouldn't say that, but based on some of his remarks, which we'll get to, questioning his bona fides is kind of natural. Check out some of his greatest hits.
And if it is true that a man who has dominated the news and poisoned the discussion for months needs to repent, then it is doubly true that a nation that can produce such a man and make his vitriol go viral needs to repent. America needs to repent for its worship of whiteness. And that's why you've got politicians who go to church every Sunday morning and then walk into that Capitol, stand under that gold dome, and come up with the dumbest legislation you can ever imagine. What we need is more guns in more places by more people. Think about all of the crazy people you bump into just on the routine every week, on your job, on the street, some of them in church. Don't look at them. Imagine all them people with guns. And then they come up with all of these clever names, stand your ground. No, it's not a stand your ground law, it's a shoot first law. Shoot first, ask questions later. In Ferguson, police power showing up in a kind of gangster and thug mentality. You can wear all kinds of colors and be a thug. You can sometimes wear the colors of the state and behave like a thug. America, nobody can serve God and the military. You can't serve God and money. You cannot serve God and mammon at the same time. America, choose ye this day whom you will serve.
Wow. I don't claim to be a biblical scholar. I do know that God has used warriors on many occasions to wipe out evil, to protect his people, which is what our military and police are supposed to do. And he's calling cops gangsters and thugs. But here's that's not even the worst part. Like I said, this guy is supposed to be a minister. Listen to what he says about abortion. Now, Warnock made these comments in an interview during his campaign. He was asked how the pro-choice views of the Democrat Party square with his role as a minister and leader of a church and a man of God. Here's what he said. I believe that healthcare is a human right, and I believe that it is something that the richest nation in the world provides for its citizens. And for me, reproductive justice is consistent with my commitment to that. What is reproductive justice? Anyway, he goes on. I believe unequivocally in a woman's right to choose, and that the decision is something that we don't want government engaged in. That's between her and her doctor and her minister, and I will fight for that in the United States Senate. He goes on. I've been focused on women's health, women's choice, reproductive justice. Again, what is that? That is consistent with my view as a Christian minister, and I will fight for it. Okay. Now, the interviewer followed up and asked him, do you think it's consistent with God's view that God endorses the millions of abortions we've had in this country since Roe versus Wade? His response. I think that human agency and freedom is consistent with my view as a minister. There is nothing about killing babies that is consistent with Christianity. Now, Loeffler has some baggage too. She's accused of dumping stocks ahead of the market crash due to the pandemic. And because she's opposed to abomination care, as I like to call it, they're accusing her of wanting to get rid of health care during a pandemic, which is, of course, total nonsense. He's a radical. She is by far the best option, so here's hoping that Georgia does the right thing. John Ossoff running against David Perdue isn't any better, and he's a demonstrable liar. Check out this ad he has playing throughout the state of Georgia.
I'm John Ossoff, and nothing's more important than keeping Georgians safe. I'll fight for Georgia's military bases. I'll defend our Second Amendment, and police officers put their lives on the line to protect us. Of course I don't support defunding the police. David Perdue is just using fear to divide us. I approve this message because it's time to come together to defeat this virus, make healthcare affordable, and rebuild trust between communities and law enforcement. That's how we keep Georgians safe.
This guy has been endorsed by Everytown for Gun Safety, the Brady PAC, and Moms Demand Boxed Wine. They would never endorse anyone who claims to want to uphold the Second Amendment. Ever. On one hand, he claims that he's a supporter of the Second Amendment and that he would uphold the Second Amendment, while at the same time, he supports a ban on the sale of rifles that they like to call assault weapons.
Look, I think that for semi-automatic weapons, whether they're rifles or handguns, we need strict licensing requirements. 9 out of 10 Americans support universal background checks, and yet Congress, which is bought by the National Rifle Association, refuses to act. And no, the general public should not be purchasing weapons that are derived from modern military technology, absent some specific need and high qualification. These are dangerous tools. They're not toys.
You can't have it both ways. He's also in favor of red flag laws and strict licensing requirements for people who purchase semi-automatic rifles and handguns, despite what he says in this ad. He's also in favor of defunding the police.
But the bottom line is you've got to have national standards. You have to have national standards for the use of force. And yeah, you've got to be able to hold individual officers and entire departments accountable. And there also has to be funding for those departments on the line.
Now, I'm not a fan of Georgia's election laws because Perdue beat Ossoff in the general election. But because he didn't get over 50% of the vote, he's forced into a runoff. And that's a whole other story because he had been ahead and over 50% until miraculously they found enough votes for Ossoff to put Perdue just under that 50% threshold. Anyway, this is where we are now. So Perdue seems to be a strong Second Amendment advocate. He doesn't go into much detail on his website. It only says that we need to enforce the laws already on the books to keep our community safe. I agree, even though I think there are too many laws on the books as it is. But he's pro-life, so those two things alone tell me that he's an infinitely better choice. Now, he beat Ossoff, like I said, in the general. I think he has a good shot at beating him in January, assuming that there are no more election fraud shenanigans. LAPD has officially been defunded. Their budget has been cut by $150 million. We were told about this months ago. We mentioned it on the show months ago. But it's now official, and we can now see how it will affect the department. LAPD will no longer respond to minor traffic accidents. If there's a hit and run, the victim will be encouraged to file a report online. Also, station desks will no longer be staffed on the weekends, and the Metro Division, air support, robbery, homicide, gang and narcotics units are all going to have cuts. They're all going to face cuts of some kind. And they will be cutting 350 officers by April of 2022. Now with that, they're just not going to backfill positions of officers who resign or retire from the force. Meanwhile, this is all happening as crime is on the rise. And it's on the rise across the country as a result of the calls for and actual follow-through on the defunding of police. Didn't they see what happened in Minneapolis? They just approved $500,000 to pay for officers from other jurisdictions to take up the slack left by the officers no longer there. Now, last week I said that they were going to hire more officers, which is not the case. So I apologize for getting that wrong. But it's just more proof that the left hates you. They don't care about your safety in the least. Now, in a very heartwarming story, an 8-year-old South Carolina boy asked the captain of the Goose Creek Police Department to be his godfather. I know that sounds a bit strange, but just hear me out. It's a great story. Kanisha Leach Patello moved to Goose Creek, South Carolina, about a year ago with her husband and her son. Her husband travels out of town for work a lot, and she wanted her son, AJ, who is on the autism spectrum, to be familiar with the police in case there was an emergency. He got a tour of the police department, got his fingerprints taken, and that's when he and the captain met, and they hit it off. They became friends. AJ started writing him letters, and they became pen pals. But in the last one, he wrote, "Dear Captain Hill, how are you? I wanted to ask you if you would be my godfather. A godfather is a dad who will be there if my dad can't, and I want that to be you. And of course, the captain accepted that honor, and he's his godfather. See, I told you, it was a very touching story. On a not so touching note, as I was preparing for the show, I saw an alert that a masked state trooper had been shot, and my heart sank because I know a few troopers from my time back in Massachusetts, and was relieved to learn that the injury was non-life-threatening. I've reached out to the guys I know, and it turns out that the trooper is going to be okay. And on an even less touching note, I am sad to report that K-9 Officer Shock from the Laverne, Tennessee Police Department was shot when a scumbag opened fire on his handler's patrol car with an AR-15. Apparently there was no provocation before he opened fire. The patrol car had just pulled out of the Laverne Police Department parking lot when another car pulled up alongside of it, and the scumbag opened fire, striking the patrol car. Shock was hit multiple times by rounds that penetrated the door and his kennel. The handler gave chase, obviously. That ended at an apartment complex where the scumbag exited his vehicle and again opened fire. Shock's handler and other officers returned fire and wounded the scumbag. Although he was mortally wounded, and he ended up getting back into his car and driving a short distance before crashing into a parked vehicle, he was taken to a hospital where he later died. Shock's handler discovered that Shock had been shot after the scumbag was taken into custody. He was transported to a veterinary hospital where he died from his wounds the next day after undergoing surgery. Rest easy, Shock. A hero remembered never dies. I have a few other stories I want to touch on before we get you out of here. The left, like I said, is calling for unity. We're supposed to forget the past 4 years calling the president illegitimate, all kinds of names. It was a 4-year hate fest of the president and everyone who supported him. But Biden had the nerve to say this when he thought he won the election.
I pledge to be a president who seeks not to divide, but unify. Who doesn't see red states and blue states, only sees the United States. For all those of you who voted for President Trump, I understand the disappointment tonight. I've lost a couple times myself, but now let's give each other a chance. It's time to put away the harsh rhetoric, lower the temperature, see each other again, listen to each other again. And to make progress, we have to stop treating our opponents as our enemies. They are not our enemies. They are Americans. They're Americans.
Meanwhile, the blue check Twitterati is all over social media spouting nothing but division. Check out this tweet from Michelle Obama. Let's remember that tens of millions of people voted for the status quo, even when it meant supporting lies, hate, chaos, and division. We've got a lot of work to do to reach out to these folks in the years ahead and connect with them on what unites us. Please. Get out of here with that. You're making it extremely difficult for those people to want unity with you. When you tell them, yeah, you're liars and you want hate and chaos and division, but come on over to our side so we can be united. That's not unity. That's submission. Not today. Right on through here, that's going to be a no. Candace Owens got herself into some trouble last week with a tweet about Harry Styles' magazine cover where he was wearing a dress. Here's her tweet. There is no society that can survive without strong men. The East knows this. In the West, the steady feminization of our men at the same time that Marxism is being taught to our children is not a coincidence. It is an outright attack. Bring back manly men. What did she say that was wrong? Men are being feminized. Men are wearing dresses. Men wearing dresses is being normalized. Men are wearing dresses on the red carpet. Men are wearing women's jewelry, nail polish, and not just the black nail polish as an emo goth thing, which has been going on for a while. And I really wouldn't be surprised if men getting fake nails was a thing, either going on right now or shortly into the future. But she took a lot of heat for that, but not because what she said was wrong, but because it hurt people's feelings and it violated some permissive PC, everything goes as long as it feels good or speaks to your truth mentality. But something else that people are not really talking about, this devalues women. And it's not just Harry Styles in a dress, that's a symptom. It's the whole transgender movement. The move to allow men who identify as women to compete in women's sports. Men in dresses in fashion shows and all the rest of it. And if it's that easy to be a woman just because I say so, what does that mean for young girls and women who are actually women if a man can just come along and pull a Sheldon and say, you're in my spot? Mark Zuckerberg and Jack Dorsey answered more questions from the Senate Commerce Committee. Check out Josh Hawley questioning Zuckerberg about coordination between Google, Facebook, and Twitter around censorship.
I'm talking about content moderation. I'm talking about individuals, websites, hashtags, phrases to ban. Is it your testimony that you do not communicate with Twitter or Google about content moderation, about individuals, websites, phrases, hashtags to ban? Just yes or no. Do your Facebook content moderation teams communicate with their counterparts at Twitter or Google?
Senator, I'm not aware of anything specific, but I think it would be probably pretty normal for people to talk to their peers and colleagues in the industry.
It would be normal, but you don't do it?
No, I'm saying that I'm not aware of any particular conversation, but I would expect that some level of communication probably happens.
Wow. He pretty much just admitted that they coordinate with content moderation between Google and Twitter. But then Ted Cruz brilliantly takes down Jack Dorsey too.
Mr. Dorsey, does voter fraud exist?
I don't know for certain.
Are you an expert in voter fraud?
No, I'm not.
Well, why then is Twitter right now putting purported warnings on virtually any statement about voter fraud?
We're simply linking to a broader conversation so that people have more information.
No, you're not. You put up a page that says, quote, voter fraud of any kind is exceedingly rare in the United States. That's not linking to a broader conversation. That's taking a disputed policy position, and you're a publisher when you're doing that. You're entitled to take a policy position, but you don't get to pretend you're not a publisher and get a special benefit under Section 230 as a result.
Dorsey is a slimy, lying sack of shit. Zuckerberg is at least pretending to care to the extent that he can. I don't believe a word he says either. I know he's just paying lip service and nothing will change until the law changes and they get smacked around, or they lose some market share to other platforms like Parler and Gab. Oh, how the mighty have fallen. Have you seen the ratings for Fox News lately? In some time slots, they are actually losing to MSDNC. Now, on one hand, it is glorious to see. But on the other, there's some hosts whose work I did enjoy on Fox. Maria Bartiromo, Tucker, Pete Hegseth, to name a few. Actually, I think that might be it. But I like Greg Gutfeld, but I stopped watching The Five a long time ago. And I've only seen his late night show a few times when it first started, maybe. But check out these ratings. And for our audio listeners, there's a chart on the screen of the ratings, and it's ugly. Hannity is losing to Maddow. And in the 25 to 54 demographic, Ingram is losing to Lamont. In total viewers, she's still beating him, but still. The only one still winning in this time slot is Tucker. But even his total viewership is down. It is a disaster over there at Fox. And if Tucker, Hannity, and Ingram's ratings continue to fall, getting rid of them is not going to be as tough a sell as I thought it was anymore. If this trend continues, don't be surprised if one and possibly all of them are on another network by this time next year. Now, I'm not predicting that. I'm not saying it's going to happen. It's just a possible scenario. And then on the flip side, Newsmax and OAN are seeing their ratings jump exponentially. Don't get me wrong, they're still way behind the big three. But with Fox falling back into lockstep with the other two, one of those two could end up being the juggernaut that Fox used to be for a long time. They forget that at least 72 million people voted for President Trump. 80 million if you believe Sidney Powell. That is a huge audience to alienate. It seems like a bad business strategy to me. Nice job, Fox. Very well done. All right, we're going to get out here with a couple of other quick stories, and we could do a whole show on this one, but I just wanted to quickly mention it. I'm sure it's going to come up again because I can definitely see a move towards something like that happening here in this country, and that's scary.
Alles existiert parallel gleichzeitig. Jede Wirklichkeit.
Entschuldigung kurz. Edgar. Entschuldigung, hier, die Polizei ist gerade da. Die Polizei ist gerade da.
Das ist doch gerade ein
Ich weiß nicht.
Guck mal, wir haben vorhin über Angst gesprochen.
Moment, hier ist gerade die Polizei, bricht gerade die Tür auf.
Polizei! Ich will die Hände sehen! Auf den Boden runter, beide! Runter auf den Boden! Geh runter!
Sonst irgendwelche Messer, Waffen, irgendwas einstecken.
Nein.
Computer aus.
Now, for our audio-only listeners, I encourage you to go to rumble.com/thelibertycast and watch the video. A German doctor who has some dissenting views from the approved coronavirus orthodoxy was arrested during a live stream. What you heard was the police banging down his door. You really think something like that couldn't happen to you or me or anyone who disagrees with the lockdowns or mask mandates or whatever other nonsense they come up with? And let me ask you, who is more likely to do something like this? President Trump or Harris? Governor Cuomo or Governor DeSantis? Comrade de Blasio and Mayor Beetlejuice? Or Mayor Betsy Price from Fort Worth, Texas? And of course, we can't let you go without another episode of Biden getting in front of a microphone and making noises with his mouth, but very few words coming out. This one was on his birthday, but it's nothing to celebrate.
We're going to employ the Defense Reconstruction Act to be able to go out there and dictate companies build and do following things. We discussed the need to help states with Title 32 funding for the National Guard. That's a fancy way of saying governors need to be able to get funding when they need to and bring their National Guard into play. And National Guards are going to have to play this. It costs a lot of money.
What the hell did you just say?
This is the guy they most likely cheated to get into the White House. Unbelievable. Well, folks, that's our show. I will try to do better next time, but thank you for watching and or listening. If you're watching on Rumble, please take a second to hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode. If you're listening on the audio version, thank you, and please subscribe there and leave us a review. I would really appreciate that. Our website is thelibertycast.net. Go to the podcast page and you'll find all the latest podcasts as well as the show notes. We're also on the rightway.site. And of course, we're on social media, Parler, Twitter, Facebook, Gab, and Instagram, at The Liberty Cast on all 5 platforms. But again, thank you for checking us out. And until next time, keep Keep your head on a swivel and stay safe, everybody.